Okay, so this is going to be my review of Resident Evil Village, Resident Evil 5, and Resident Evil 3, the remake. So this is going to be a long video, so strap in. We have a lot of games to cover here, so without further ado, let's just go ahead and dive straight into it. So we're going to go from worst to best here. So starting off with the worst, the bottom of the barrel, the shithole of these three games is Resident Evil 3. And now, getting into my problems regarding Resident Evil 3 is the story and the narrative in this game. This is a very rushed single player. Like, you can slam this out in 4 to 5 hours. And there's a lot of information that is cut and that is unclear as you progress through this story. And just it feels like the characters are jumping from one location to another location to another location without a cohesive narrative surrounding it. And then second is character motivations. So there's a reveal for a villain that happens at the end of the game that I didn't see the point of. Like, he shows up a handful of times in the first 2 acts. And then we're introduced to him as being this big bad. And his motivation is very unclear. His character is very underdeveloped. Who does this guy work for? Who is he? What's his end game that he wants to come out of this? All of those questions are not answered here. And the most disappointing thing is if you remove his character entirely from the game, the single player wouldn't be any different. Like, the only time that you actually see him at the end of the game is through cutscenes. There's never any interaction with this character. You never do any missions surrounding capturing him. And so his character just felt like a big letdown and felt like, I guess, a Hail Mary just to get this game to a 4-hour length. And now, we're all playing Resident Evil 3 because we want to see Nemesis. And this sucks for me to say, but Nemesis is a massive disappointment in this game. Like I said, I haven't played the first 3 Resident Evil games. I didn't grow up during the era where they were at their peak. And so this game was my introduction to the Nemesis storyline. And I can say I'm not very impressed. Nemesis feels very repetitive in this game because every 15 to 20 minutes there's a boss fight of him. The first boss is on top of a rooftop, and then you see a second form of him as this dog-like figure. And just this game really feels like it's resolved around boss fights with Nemesis. While it's cool fighting Nemesis and it's cool going head to head with him, one thing the other Resident Evil games did excellent in my mind is having mini bosses and having other villains that you fight along the way leading up to the big bad of the story that you'll go head to head with at the end. And so it makes the final boss feel earned. It makes it feel climactic. In this game, as soon as you fight Nemesis once, the next 5 boss fights, they're not satisfying. And just, Nemesis just doesn't really have a whole lot to do. Like, he pokes his head out, every once in a while to cause some problems. But that's really it. Like, a lot of the missions revolving around him are, are running away from him or going head to head with him. And yeah. So, as far as Nemesis' story, I wasn't particularly impressed. That the game never gave me like any satisfaction to finally defeat him. So, Resident Evil 3, while not the greatest, it does have some redeeming qualities as well, such as the graphic design, looks really good. The world design and the atmosphere and the sound, all of that is really great in this. And Jill's character model design, looks really good. This does capture the look and the appeal of the Resident Evil 2 remake, so they do bring that over really nicely here. It's the ammo system was all right. Yeah, so there's a few things I can grab out of this game as being redeemable, but as far as, I guess, replay factor, I'm not going to play this game over almost any of the other Resident Evil games. So now getting to the middle chapter is Resident Evil 5. Now this was the first time Resident Evil introduced co-op. And, my thoughts on this game is this is where they really start leaning heavy into the action of the franchise, which, the action is really good, it's fresh. The ammo system here, you have there's a lot more opportunities to grab ammo and grenades, which does make the game, move at a faster pace. There's some cool weapons that you pick up. But where my problems come in with this game is this feels like it should have been two different Resident Evil games. This feels like two different creators made it, because you have the first half of the game that is focused in Africa and taking down the guy of this corporation, and then you have the second half of the game focusing on Umbrella and Wesker. And so, it's very obvious when they change tones in the game. And just, I found it very jarring, because by the time you actually get to the Umbrella stuff, it's completely ignored everything that happened in the first half. There is definitely some connections between Umbrella and what does happen, but they're very minor, and they don't really go into it all that much, besides a couple of visuals explaining the very minor connections. Chris, once again, is really good here. Shiva, I just found really annoying in the game. Like, I played this single player. This game is definitely made to be played as a multiplayer rather than a single player, because Shiva as a bot is a very annoying character, and it has a very annoying, I guess, health system here, where whether it's Shiva, whether it's Chris, you both die. Even if your, I guess, opponent dies, you both die, which does make certain aspects of the game really, really hard to play. Especially towards the middle portion of the game. They do some really cool stuff here with Jill, but once again, Jill doesn't really have anything to do in the story, and it's not to explain, like, her little section in the game, it is fun, It's a cool twist. Yeah, that's really all I can say there. Wesker's boss fight, I thought was really cool. I thought there were a lot of really cool factors to it. The idea of like turning off all the lights and using darkness as a factor to attack him. I really liked that. The fight that takes place on lava is a full-on homage to Revenge of the Sith. Even going as far as like recreating certain aspects to that with a few minor tweaks to it. Wesker, he's in here. He's not in the whole game a lot. I like the flashbacks that go back to the Spencer mansion and that show more of Wesker's backstory. I did like that part of the game. I thought they were some of the best parts of the game. But yeah, this is just another fun chapter. Like, this is exactly like Resident Evil 4, where this is more the solo game and the solo mission for Chris. It's not really, I guess, connected to a bigger picture. It doesn't really continue on from the original 3 games. These are just kind of like little solo games for you to kind of play and see them on their own mission. Which I liked, and I liked the change of scenery here. So there's some good stuff in the game. And now going on to the best game is Resident Evil Village. And now this one I have a story behind. So I was very hesitant to play this game at first. Just because, I didn't like the idea of bringing werewolves and lycans and witches and bringing this very fairy tale approach to Resident Evil. Like, seeing the first images and seeing the trailers, I was like, this doesn't feel like Resident Evil. And so I was very skeptical on it. Like, I didn't play it for years, just because I couldn't get my head around, why do we need werewolves in a Resident Evil game? But, saying that, I was a big fan of Biohazard. That's actually one of the best games I have played in years. So, I was willing to give this one the benefit of the doubt. So, I sat down and I slammed out this game, in about 3 days. I also played the DLC, the Shadow of, God damn it, I actually forgot the character's name now. I really want to say Alice, but I know it's not Alice, and I'm thinking of the movies there. Well, the DLC that came with this, it came with Mercenaries, and then it came with another single player campaign where you're focused on Ethan's daughter. So, I spent countless hours playing this, and I loved this game so much. Right from the start, it immediately grabs your attention by building mystery and intrigue. There's a really gripping and interesting opening sequence with Chris Redfield, and so I was very keen to see where they were going to go with that, because it looks like they were going to set it up to be something else, and it was going to be a different approach for the character. And then when you start walking through the forest, the sound design clicks in, and you are right back into Resident Evil. This has everything you enjoyed about Resident Evil 7 Biohazard, with a mix of Resident Evil 4 in here. This game even goes as far to recreate missions directly from Resident Evil 4. Like, there's a mission in here that takes place on the lake, and it has a very similar layout to Resident Evil 4. There's some locations that directly remind you of Resident Evil 4. But but yeah, the sound design is great in here. You know, as always, this isn't really a scary game per se. Like, I'd say the first quarter of the game is like peak horror when it comes to this game. But then once you arrive at the castle and you arrive in this medieval setting, that's when the game kind of changes from horror to action fantasy. And you know, I had a great time, you know, taking down these werewolves and going up against all these different boss fights in the game. You have a boss that is I guess the evil version of Pinocchio, which that was one of my favorite side missions in the campaign here, and easily one of the scariest as well. You know, I'll put it this way. Gooey Baby. When you play it, keep an eye out for that, because my god, that shit's fucked up. And so, you know, this game definitely does have some creepy moments. It has the intensity of a Resident Evil game. It has the suspense and the first person perspective, like, just, you know, once again proves that it's a great and welcomed addition to the Resident Evil world, and it's a great way to invest yourself in this world. And this is one of the biggest Resident Evil games as far as locations, because this is a massive world and it's a massive landscape, and there's a lot of story and lore to be delved into as the story goes along. And there's even a location in the game that I really liked that looks very ominous to the Spencer Mansion. This is like one of the first missions that you do in the game, you know, that I really liked. I loved what they did with Chris Redfield in here and the way that his character plays a part in the story. You know, I really loved all that. I love the variety of bosses. I love the variety of combat and weapons that you use in the game. You know, this game probably does have, like more, I guess, more ammo compared to some of the other Resident Evil games, but you know, there's still points where you are stuck, which I really like those. And just, yeah, this felt the most like, Resident Evil. This felt like the same world. Yeah, there's really not much else to really say here. The ending of the game, is really, really sad. And I was not expecting them to go this approach. And then definitely pick up the DLC as well, because there's some twist. There's some twist in the game that does change the outcome. So yeah, I had a damn good time with this game. I'm really excited to see where they go with Chris Redfield's character, because they leave his character on a very interesting note, where there's a potential link in and connection for Umbrella to come in the next game. So we'll see what happens there. But I can always fantasize about that. But yeah, this game captures all of the best elements. It captures everything you liked about Resident Evil 7 and all the other installments. You have two different options on how to play this. You can play it like a more like stealth option, or you can play it more as a guns blazing type of game. So depending on what game style you like, you know, you have your options here. So yeah, I had a great time. This game surpassed any expectations I had. So, you know, that is it for my Resident Evil reviews. If you have played any of these games, let me know down in the comment section. What do you think of Resident Evil Village, Resident Evil 5, and Resident Evil 3, the remake? And while you're there, let me know your ranking for the Resident Evil video game franchise. And until next time, guys, I'll see you in the next video.